So I received an email from Jimmy. He's a beat maker from Greece, and he has a number of questions about music production. He's just getting started. I wanted to go ahead and read this email and address these questions. Really, on a weekly basis, I get very similar questions to this, whether it be somebody messaging me on Facebook or YouTube or through email. He says, yo, I'm a beat maker from Greece. I have some questions I would like you to answer. I'm working with Mixcraft 7. It's good to me, but what other programs like Fruity Loops, Reason, and more are better than Mixcraft? Should I start working with one of them? Also, I want to start working with hardware, so I'm thinking of buying an MPC for starters. What do you have to suggest? Thanks and keep it up. So the first thing I want to go ahead and address is I shot a video a while ago, which I'm going to link below and probably somewhere on this video, about picking the best, what's the best software, what's the best DAW for your music production. You said you've already got into Mixcraft 7, and what I would recommend for anybody starting and trying to figure out what software to pick is you just gotta find the starting point. You gotta find the software, whether it be FL or Reason or Mixcraft or whatever. Find a software to start with and master it. As you're mastering it, you're starting to create. Start to learn and maybe dig into some other information and figure out what these other DAWs have to offer versus what you're currently using. And if you ever feel like you're being limited within the current software is when you want to expand. For instance, when I first started with Fruity Loops back in 2006, the software was not as advanced as it is now, and it was very difficult at the time for me to chop a sample. I couldn't chop a sample directly in FL. I had to use Adobe Audition. I think I was using import the audio into Adobe Audition. I would chop the sample, and then I would re-import all the sample slices into FL and chop and arrange samples. And so I was working with that for a while, but I felt very limited. I didn't really like the workflow. Then I got introduced to Ableton, and I got into that and figured out that, okay, I can do this, I can chop samples a lot quicker, I can do this all in the box. And for what I do, the type of tracks that I'm making, from my thought process and my creative flow, Ableton works great. But for other people, they open it up and they're like, I don't even know how to get started with this, versus using an FL sequencer or some other software. So again, like I mentioned in that video, is just start with something. If you're on Mixcraft 7, my recommendation would be to master that particular software, because you can have great music in the most simple software application. I mean, you hear a lot of dope tracks, dope producers online that are making beats. They use a wide array of different software. It's not just Reason, it's not just FL, it's not just Ableton. You already have time invested into this software. Continue to learn, continue to explore, continue to learn all the capabilities. Maybe look at some tutorials on this particular software and master this. But to me, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. The end result is what matters. And so the second part was asking about purchasing hardware, like an MPC or synthesizer. And for those of you guys who follow me, you know I don't have any hardware in my setup. This is, I got an MPK49 is a controller. I've got an MPD32 controller. I've got another electric piano over here, which I use as a MIDI controller. It's all sample based and it's all virtual instruments. So currently, to date, I've never personally used any hardware like an MPC. And that's a misconception a lot of people make, is they see this MPD, this controller, because it's made by Akai and it looks maybe similar to an MPC, and they just automatically assume because of the sound. And that's another thing that there's a misconception, I feel like, too, with you seeing some maybe older producers or producers that particularly use an MPC, and you look at that like, if I want this type of sound, I've got to use that piece of hardware. And yes, where there is some warmth and some different things you're going to get with an analog piece of equipment, software is so good and advanced now that, if I want an MPC swing, I can emulate that in Ableton. Or if I want to create a certain type of sound, I can pretty much be able to do that in a machine or some other type of software or workstation with all the advancements and capabilities that software has now. So I would just recommend knowing why you want the MPC. If it's definitely a piece of hardware that you want, for whatever reason, it's going to be a lot more investment up front. If you have the budget for it, great. And if it's something that you want to know more about, I just highly encourage you to find those people that are the heavy MPC users. Go online and look for some MPC tutorials, for some MPC information, or if you're looking for a specific keyboard or synthesizer, just Google search, dig into some more information on that. So if you're on a limited budget, software can take you a long way. I remember when I first started making beats and I had FL and I was using an audio trigger finger, which is about, I think at the time was about $100 new. I might have got it used even. Just a basic drum pad, and then I actually borrowed a 49 key. It wasn't even a designated MIDI keyboard. It just had MIDI capabilities. It was a very cheap keyboard that I borrowed from, I think, a friend, a family member. It wasn't the best controller, but at the time I was on a budget, and with those two in my software, I was good and I could do a lot of stuff. And then, like I said before, when I started feeling limited and constrained within the setup that I had is when I started exploring and upgrading. So again, just remember that just because you see a certain producer making a certain sound with a certain type of equipment, keyboard, a certain piece of software, doesn't mean that that cannot be achieved in another setup with a totally different workflow. It really is the man behind the music. It's always going to come back to you as an individual, your creativity, and working with the tools that you have at hand. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any other questions that you'd like addressed, feel free to hit me up. The link to my contact, social media will all be in the description. Also, a link to the video where I shot on picking the best DAW for your music production. So thanks again, and I will see you in the next video.